black mechanic faced scornful looks when he arrived to repair a billionaire's jet. Minutes later, she surprised the whole world. Laughter echoed through the hangar when Marcus Jennings parked his old pickup truck on the private runway at Westlake International Airport. Through the tempered glass windows of the VIP terminal, executives in immaculate suits exchanged looks of disbelief and derision as the 38-year-old black mechanic, his hands scarred from work, unloaded his battered toolbox. "Is this the expert they called for Mrs. Evans' jet?" asked Richard Hastings, director of operations for Evans Aerospace, not hiding his disdain. "I thought we asked for the best technician in the area, not someone who looks like he just rolled out of a roadside repair shop." Marcus heard the comment but kept his dignity intact. This was nothing new in his life. What no one knew was that those hands had saved more luxury aircraft than all the certified technicians at that airport combined. 15 years repairing executive jets and national awards for technical excellence. And yet, his face made more of an impact than his resume. "Mrs. Evans' jet needs to take off in 2 hours," said the runway supervisor, keeping a calculated distance. "Our technicians haven't been able to identify the problem. If you don't fix it in time, we'll call the Atlanta team." The Gulfstream G650 gleamed in the morning sun like a pristine $65 million jewel. As Marcus approached, he noticed eyes following him through the terminal windows. Critical eyes, doubtful eyes, and one pair of eyes that stood out. Observant, calculating, intrigued. "Let him work," a female voice ordered, cutting through the silence like a knife. Alexandra Evans, 43, CEO of Evans Aerospace and owner of the jet, strode across the tarmac with purposeful steps. Her navy blue suit contrasted with her immaculately styled brown hair. She didn't look at the executives, only at Marcus. "How much time do you need?" "It depends on the problem, ma'am," Marcus replied, holding her gaze without hesitation. "You have 1 hour?" Alexandra replied, checking her wristwatch, which was worth more than Marcus' annual salary. "Impress me." As the executives returned to the comfort of the air conditioning, Marcus opened the main access panel and immediately understood the gravity of the situation. The pressurization system had a catastrophic failure that previous technicians had mistaken for a simple electrical problem. If the jet took off in that condition, the cabin would depressurize at 45,000 feet, killing everyone on board. His hands moved with surgical precision as he set to work. No one realized that he wasn't just making repairs. He was saving lives. Out of the corner of his eye, he noticed Alexandra Evans watching him intently through the glass, her gaze different from everyone else's. It wasn't contempt. It was recognition. 30 minutes later, the problem was solved. Marcus closed the panel, wiped his hands on a worn cloth, and began gathering his tools. His work was done. No thanks would be necessary. They rarely were. For people like him, doing the job perfectly was the minimum expectation. Never cause for celebration. Then, Alexandra Evans emerged from the terminal again, this time alone. She walked directly to Marcus, ignoring the confused looks from her staff. "How long would it have taken them to discover the real problem?" she asked, her voice controlled. "They would never have found it," Marcus replied bluntly. "The jet would have crashed with everyone on board before then." The silence that followed was heavy. Alexandra's eyes examined Marcus with disconcerting intensity. "Come with me," she ordered, surprising everyone, especially Richard Hastings, who watched the scene with growing discomfort. Now, what no one at that airport could have imagined was that this moment was not just about a repaired jet or lives saved. It was the beginning of a story that would challenge prejudices rooted for generations and expose truths that the aviation elite had tried to hide for decades. The biggest of these, the man who had just saved that jet had designed the pressurization system that equipped half of Evans Aerospace's fleet, a system for which Richard Hastings had received all the credit and promotions. Who would have thought that Alexandra Evans' decision in the next few minutes would not only change Marcus' life, but shake the foundations of an entire industry? If you're enjoying this story, kindly do us a favor and subscribe to our channel. It is free and won't cost anything, but it means the world to us. We are just a small channel trying to grow. And do not forget to comment where you're watching from. Thank you, and back to our video. The executive's eyes followed Marcus and Alexandra as they walked away from the jet, leaving a trail of speculation and nervous whispers in the air. Richard Hastings watched the scene with his face contorted into a mask of worry, his body tense like a violin string about to snap. "My office now," Alexandra commanded, leading Marcus to an area of the terminal that few employees were allowed to access. Not a word was exchanged during the walk, only the sound of their footsteps echoing through the polished hallways. The private office proved to be a perfect combination of luxury and functionality. Alexandra closed the door, motioned for Marcus to take a chair, and sat down behind her desk. "Did you tell me your full name?" she asked, her eyes studying every detail of him. "Marcus Jennings." A heavy silence filled the room as she typed something into her tablet. Her eyes widened slightly. "Marcus Jennings. MJ," she murmured. "The initials engraved on all the original designs for our G7 pressurization system." Marcus remained impassive, but his fingers tightened slightly on the armrest. She knew 3 patents, 4 innovation awards, a master's degree in aerospace engineering from the Technical University. "And yet you repair jets like a common mechanic. Why?" "Because no one hires a black engineer from the suburbs to lead development teams," he replied without hesitation. "And mechanics have bills to pay, Ms. Evans." Alexandra opened a drawer and pulled out a folder. Inside were corporate documents detailing the development of the G7 system, all signed by Richard Hastings as chief engineer. "Do you know how much profit that system has brought my company in the last 5 years?" she asked, leafing through the documents. "Approximately $428 million, Marcus replied. "The system reduced fuel consumption by 23% and maintenance costs by 31%. Alexandra looked up, surprised by the accuracy of his answer. Richards received 3 promotions and a $2.5 million bonus for his work, she continued. While I continued to fix jets," Marcus finished, showing no emotion. The conversation was interrupted by insistent knocking at the door. Richard Hastings entered without waiting for a response. His face was a mixture of false concern and poorly concealed anxiety. "Alexandra, the board is waiting for you on the video conference, and we need to discuss." He stopped when he saw Marcus, his expression hardening. "What is he still doing here? The service is complete, right?" "Actually, we were discussing intellectual property," Alexandra replied calmly. "Specifically, the G7 system." Hastings' face paled visibly. "I don't understand what a mechanic would have to contribute to this discussion." "Really interesting," Alexandra interrupted, opening another file on her tablet. "Because I have here the original G7 designs with the initials MJ, and I just found out that they belong to Marcus Jennings, who worked briefly in the development department 5 years ago." "Alexandra, this is absurd." Hastings forced a laugh. "He was just an assistant technician. The G7 system was developed entirely by my team." Just then, the door opened again. A middle-aged woman entered carrying a briefcase even thicker than Alexandra's. "Dr. Sophia Chun, Evans Aerospace's chief legal officer," Marcus recognized from reports about the company. "Forgive me for being late, Alexandra. I had to double-check the intellectual property records," she said, nodding politely to Marcus before turning to Hastings with an icy stare. "And yes, I've confirmed everything. The digital signature on the original files matches Mr. Jennings. Not you, Richard." Hastings seemed to choke on his own words. There must be some mistake. He worked under my supervision." "Any minor contribution?" Alexandra interrupted, opening another file on her tablet. "Richard, I have emails here from you to the HR department recommending Mr. Jennings' dismissal for technical incompetence exactly 3 days after he submitted the complete G7 project to the internal system." Marcus watched the scene with a calmness that surprised even himself. 5 years ago, when he was escorted out of the building like a criminal, humiliated in front of the entire team, he had sworn that one day the truth would come out. He hadn't expected it to be like this or so sudden. "Mr. Jennings," Alexandra said, turning to him, "Dr. Chun has prepared some documents she would like you to review. Basically, we are proposing retroactive recognition of your authorship, financial compensation for royalties owed, And a proposal. What kind of proposal? Marcus asked, keeping his voice steady. The kind that makes history, she replied before turning to Hastings. Richard, you are temporarily relieved of your duties pending the conclusion of the internal investigation. Please hand your badge to security. Hastings faltered, his face a mask of contained rage. You can't do this. The board would never. The board will be informed in an hour. Alexandra cut him off. And if you want to retain any dignity, I suggest you walk out that door now before I decide to call security. When Hastings left, slamming the door with unnecessary force, Alexandra turned to Marcus and Sophia. Now we can really get started. What happened in the next 2 hours would change not only Marcus' future, but the entire power structure within Evans Aerospace. As Sophia pored over the legal documents, Marcus realized something surprising about Alexandra Evans. She wasn't just trying to right a wrong. There was something else in her eyes, a recognition, an understanding of something much bigger. What no one could have imagined was that Alexandra Evans was keeping a secret of her own. Her briefcase contained not only the documents about the G7 system, but also a thorough 2-year investigation into systematic patterns of discrimination and idea theft within her own company. Marcus Jennings wasn't the first, just the brightest, and the one who had left the most indisputable evidence. Alexandra had waited patiently for the perfect moment to dismantle the entire system from within. Meanwhile, in the airport parking lot, Richard Hastings made a desperate call to his colleagues on the board. His empire was crumbling, but he still had a card up his sleeve. Documents and alliances that could not only destroy Marcus' career, but also bring down Alexandra Evans herself. What he didn't know was that his every move was being monitored, every call recorded, and that the real battle was just beginning. Alexandra Evans' private meeting room was a world apart from the rest of the airport. Marcus sat uncomfortably in the leather chair as she closed the door, isolating them from the hub above the terminal. The pressurization system you repaired, Alexandra began, is a modified version of the G7, isn't it? Marcus kept his face impassive. Yes, ma'am. A system that Richard Hastings supposedly designed and for which he received a 7-figure bonus. She slid a folder across the table. A system that, interestingly, has the initials MJ on the original blueprints. Silence hung between them for a few seconds. 5 years ago, Alexandra continued, you were a junior engineer at Evans Aerospace. You were fired for technical incompetence 3 days after submitting a complete design to the development department. I have bills to pay, Marcus replied calmly. Manchiks pay bills too. Alexandra leaned forward. You know what else I found out, Mr. Jennings? You weren't the only one. Over the past 10 years, 7 talented employees have been fired under similar circumstances. All Black or Latino, all shortly after contributing significant innovations. The door opened, and a middle-aged woman entered carrying a tablet. Sorry I'm late. Marcus, this is Dr. Vanessa Chun, our new general counsel. Vanessa has been conducting an investigation for the past 8 months. The lawyer nodded. Mr. Jennings, we have substantial evidence of systematic intellectual property theft within Evans Aerospace. Your case is just the tip of the iceberg. In Marcus' mind, flashes of memory stirred. The nights working alone in the lab, the excitement of solving the pressurization problem that no one else could figure out, Hastings' calculating look when he saw the results, the public humiliation of being escorted out of the building. Why are you telling me this? He asked. Because I need your help, Alexandra replied. Richard Hastings controls half the board. He has powerful friends. I need irrefutable proof to bring him down. And what's in it for me? Recognition. Financial compensation for the royalties. She hesitated briefly. The position of Director of Innovation that should have been yours 5 years ago. Marcus almost laughed. Do you really think the board would accept a black mechanic as director? Alexandra smiled for the first time. They won't have a choice when they understand what's at stake. Dr. Chun slid a document across the table. This is a confidentiality agreement. Anything we discuss here. They were interrupted by insistent knocking. Richard Hastings entered without waiting for a response. His face a mask of false concern. Alexandra, the board is waiting. And why is this contract employee still here? We were discussing the G7 system, Alexandra replied calmly. Hastings' face paled subtly. I don't understand what a mechanic would have to contribute to advanced engineering. Fascinating, isn't it? Alexandra showed him a diagram on her tablet. These are the original drawings initialed MJ. Marcus was just an assistant technician. Hastings forced a laugh. Any minor contribution? Minor, Alexandra interrupted. I have emails from you recommending Mr. Jennings' dismissal for technical incompetence 3 days after he submitted this design. If you're enjoying this story, kindly do us a favor and subscribe to our channel. It is free and won't cost anything, but it means the world to us. We are just a small channel trying to grow. And do not forget to comment where you're watching from. Thank you, and back to our video. Hastings quickly regained his composure. Alexandra, we have an important video conference. The board won't wait while you listen to conspiracy theories. Richard stood up. You are temporarily suspended pending the conclusion of the internal investigation. You can't do that, he exclaimed. The board would never. The board will be informed in an hour. Alexandra cut him off. I suggest you maintain some dignity and leave now. When the door slammed shut, Alexandra turned to Marcus. We have 2 weeks until the general shareholders meeting. We need concrete evidence by then. I have something better, Marcus replied. Finally, I have the original G7 prototype with my development records, dated and digitally signed. And what's more, I have recordings. Alexandra's eyes widened. Recordings from 5 years ago? Hastings explaining how to clean my contribution from the company records, how to discredit me word for word. Dr. Chun looked impressed. How did you get that? Marcus smiled for the first time. I grew up repairing electronic equipment in the poorest neighborhood in town. I learned early on that people like me need insurance against people like him. What Alexandra Evans couldn't imagine was that Marcus hadn't just kept evidence about his own case. In his 5 years working as a mechanic, he had meticulously catalogued every stolen patent, every appropriated idea, every talent wasted by institutional prejudice. His simple appearance was his best camouflage. While he repaired Billionaire's jets, he secretly collected the fuel needed to burn down an entire system. Richard Hastings thought he was dealing with nothing more than a humiliated mechanic. He was about to discover that he was facing not only an engineering genius, but a patient strategist who had turned 5 years of forced invisibility into the perfect weapon against those who underestimated him. 6 months later, Evans Aerospace headquarters was unrecognizable. The executive floor, once occupied exclusively by white men, now reflected the diversity Alexandra Evans had promised to implement. At the center of this new chapter was Marcus Jennings, no longer an anonymous mechanic but director of technological innovation, leading the division that had created the G7 system. The extraordinary shareholders meeting that had taken place months earlier had gone down in American corporate history. Alexandra Evans, with Dr. Chun at her side, had presented irrefutable evidence of systematic discrimination and intellectual appropriation, culminating in the devastating recording of Richard Hastings. We need to get rid of this pretentious mechanic, Hastings' voice echoed through the loudspeakers of the crowded auditorium. Take ownership of the system. Eliminate any trace of her authorship. Who would believe that a black woman from the suburbs created something so sophisticated? Our customers trust us, not people like her. The silence that followed was broken by a growing murmur of indignation. The company's stock plummeted 18% that day, but what came next surprised even the most skeptical. I could have sued individually, Marcus explained in his first interview with the prestigious aviation technology magazine. But the problem was bigger than Richard Hastings. It was systemic. The solution proposed by Marcus and fully supported by Alexandra was revolutionary. Create a program to identify and reward all employees whose intellectual property had been appropriated over the past 10 years. More than that, establish an innovation fund specifically targeted at historically marginalized communities. Richard Hastings, meanwhile, faced multiple lawsuits. His professional credentials were revoked, and his reputation destroyed. The man who had once ridiculed Marcus on the tarmac now couldn't even find a job as a consultant at third-rate companies. Revenge wasn't my goal, Marcus confided to Alexandra during the inauguration of the Evans Aerospace-funded Community Technology Development Center. Justice was. Visibility was. The center, located in the very neighborhood where Marcus had grown up, offered advanced technical training to young people without access to quality formal education. Under his guidance, 3 revolutionary patents had already emerged from students in the program. You know what's ironic? Alexandra asked, watching a group of teenagers working on a prototype. If Hastings had simply shared the credit with you, he'd still be director. Greed makes people completely underestimate the potential of others. Even more surprising was the proposal Alexandra made to Marcus 3 months after he was hired. It wasn't just a management position she was offering him, but a partnership, literally and figuratively. I thought she was crazy when she suggested a merger, Marcus confessed on Good Morning America. Not a marriage, as people speculated, but a business merger. My small engineering company, which I had kept running out of my garage during those 5 years as a mechanic, was now worth 30% of Evans Aerospace. The former executives who had laughed at him that morning on the runway were no longer laughing. Some had resigned, unable to serve under her leadership. Others remained, learning the hard way that talent and competence have no color. On the 1-year anniversary of the incident, Alexandra organized a special event. All employees were invited to the launch of a new propulsion system developed by Marcus' team, a technology that would reduce fuel consumption in commercial aircraft by 40%. A year ago, many of you witnessed a black man being ridiculed while saving lives. Alexandra began her speech. Today, that same man is saving our industry, our planet, and more importantly, he is saving dreams that could have been stifled by prejudice. Marcus scanned the audience, identifying faces that had once treated him with disdain and now applauded him standing. He didn't feel proud of that particular transformation. He knew some were applauding out of self-interest, not genuine conversion. But the young engineers from diverse backgrounds who now occupied positions once unattainable? For them, the effort had been worth every second. In the front row sat an unexpected figure. His mother, Mrs. Jennings, 72, who had worked as a cleaning lady in corporate buildings her entire life so that he could go to college. Her eyes were brimming with tears. Real change, Marcus concluded in his speech, doesn't happen when people like me break through the barrier and achieve success. It happens when we open the doors and ensure that talent isn't wasted because of absurd prejudices. True justice isn't just individual, it's structural. The story of the mechanic who became co-owner inspired an entire generation of young engineers from marginalized communities. Similar programs began to emerge at other corporations, partly due to social pressure, partly because they saw the unquestionable success of Evans Aerospace after embracing diversity, not as a slogan but as a concrete practice. Success did not erase the scars of a lifetime of prejudice, but it gave Marcus a powerful platform to transform outrage into positive impact. And as he watched the young students at his community center, he knew that the greatest victory was not his job or his fortune, but the look in those young people's eyes, unburdened by the doubt he had carried for decades. The best response to prejudice has never been individual success, but creating a path for others to follow, free from the obstacles that nearly destroyed his dreams. If this story of discrimination turned into collective triumph has touched your heart, subscribe to the channel right now to follow other stories of justice that prove a fundamental truth. Sometimes the greatest act of dignity is not just overcoming barriers, but tearing down the walls so that no one else has to climb so high just to have a fair chance.